In 1976, 18-year-old Prince Rogers Nelson walked into Sound 80 Studios in Minneapolis and created a demo tape, playing all the instruments himself. By the next year, those tapes earned him a major recording contract, launching his career as Prince. Tonight, musical historian Kristen Zschomler will discuss Prince's journey from Minneapolis' North Side to Paisley Park and his global impact. Kristen researches and writes about Prince, the Minneapolis Sound, and Twin Cities music history. She developed the Sound Around Music Tours app. If you hadn't noticed already, there are little business cards advertising it on your chair, which offers self-guided tours of Twin Cities music landmarks. Kristen has also been instrumental in getting Prince's childhood home and Sound 80 Studios recognized as historically significant through the National Register of Historic Places. Kristen owns Sound History LLC, a consulting firm focused on Prince and Twin Cities music history. She co-founded the International Center for Prince Studies, which hosts academic conferences and publishes research on Prince. Kristen has also hosted presentations on Prince as part of Preserve Minneapolis' annual tour series. During the 2020 COVID quarantine, she hosted a Zoom presentation that attracted Prince fans from as far away as England and Australia. Please welcome tonight's speaker, Kristen Zschomler.
All right, well, thank you all for coming out on this stormy night, and thanks for the patience that we had to reschedule last time. I'm starting to wonder if Prince doesn't want me to sort of talk about him, because he keeps sending this bad weather impacting our talks. But like Ruth said, what we're going to talk tonight is about Prince and that symbiotic connection that he has with Minneapolis. Prince is not just an extraordinary musical talent. He is so intertwined with the city that he was born and grew up in, and also had sort of a complicated relationship with. So I'm hoping that through tonight's story, you can learn a little bit about how Prince came to be, how the city shaped him, and how he shaped it. But let's start by going back in time to 1980. Prince had just released his second album. It was self-titled, and he was starting to go on television shows. His second show was with Dick Clark, American Bandstand. Now, Prince decided before they went on that he was going to be all coy and not really answer Dick's questions and all that stuff. So it's great. You could Google it and watch this interview. But after Prince and his band stopped playing, Dick Clark walked onto the stage and said, "This is not the kind of music that comes from Minneapolis, Minnesota." And interestingly, what Prince says is, "Where?" And Dick Clark repeats himself, "This isn't what comes from Minneapolis, Minnesota." And Prince says, "No." Which is really weird when you think about it, because, right, so many of us think about Prince being so proud, having come from Minneapolis. But Prince also, throughout his career, he liked to keep people guessing. He would play around with, my dad was black, my mom was Italian, or, am I straight or gay? All these things, because he knew that as a black man coming from a predominantly white area, it was going to be hard to make it. So if he kept people guessing, they couldn't pigeonhole him and limit him to black radio stations. He once said, "So much has been written about me. People don't know what's right or wrong. I would rather let them stay confused." So, and that's definitely true throughout his career. So what we're going to talk about, though, is the work that I've been doing since Prince's passing as a historian and preservationist. I've been working for 35 years in the historic preservation field. I review projects to see if they're going to affect historic places, and if so, what can we do to mitigate for those effects? So most of the time I'm dealing with, historic churches, archaeological sites, those types of things. But after Prince died, and I've felt sort of that loss that many fans felt, and I thought, what can I do to honor his legacy? And so I started researching places associated with Prince. And what started out as just trying to find the right childhood home led to me identifying 50 different locations, some of which were well-known, some of which had been sort of obfuscated, perhaps in part by Prince. And so again, just want to tell that story to contextualize Prince and the importance of his relationship to Minnesota. So Prince is considered the architect of the Minneapolis Sound. Now, a lot of people will have heard that term, but maybe are like, what exactly makes it the Minneapolis Sound? And did Prince create it by himself? Of course not. I think you all had the opportunity to have a talk by the great Andrea Swenson, who wrote a wonderful book called Got to Be Something Here, The Story of the Rise of the Minneapolis Sound. Prince did not descend from the sky. He was not an alien being down here. He grew up in this context of great music in the Twin Cities. But what he did was he really took all these elements that he experienced growing up and fused them into a new genre, which we now refer to as the Minneapolis Sound. It's, it's got heavy synths in it, drum machines, typically not a lot of horns. When the Minneapolis Sound first started, you would fill those in with synthesizers and such. But for those of us who were around when Prince was making it, that Minneapolis Sound dominated the airways. It was everywhere. And so Prince really is the person who fused a lot of the sounds that he experienced here in the Twin Cities to create this new musical genre. I mentioned that today we're going to be talking about Prince places, and I think it's pretty obvious when we think about Prince. What do you think of as far as a place? First Avenue, very good. First Avenue is an obvious place that we associate with Prince. Why? The 1984 movie Purple Rain was pretty much, half of it was filmed in there. That was the setting for the movie. He also live recorded the song Purple Rain and others in that space during a concert. So the connection there with Prince is incredibly deep. And after his passing, this was a place where thousands of us gathered to honor his life and his legacy. What's the other place? Paisley Park. Paisley Park is in our hearts, of course, and we're going to talk about this a little bit further in our journey. But Paisley Park is, an artist compound that Prince started building when he was only 25, 26 years old, after the heady success of Purple Rain, and he was able to build this artist compound that was not specifically designed to be a home, even though it did become his home later in life. Like I said, Prince grew up here. He lived here most of his life, except for very short periods of time, Toronto for a while, LA for a while. But because he spent most of his life here, there are going to be a lot of places associated with him. And that is, again, part of what I was trying to do as a preservationist. You can't save and preserve these places and tell the story if you can't, figure out exactly where they are. So I mentioned that Prince has a complicated relationship with his hometown. He once stated that he is as much a part of Minneapolis as he is anything, and that as he grew up here, he really saw the opportunities and the oppression. If you were able to see Andrea Swenson's talk, I'm sure she highlighted, he was insistent that the reason he and so many other great musicians came out of the Twin Cities was because of the strong music program in the schools. So that's not, example of the opportunities that Prince had in this community, but he also, experienced a lot of the oppression. So let's take a step even a little bit further back and learn how the man who, created the Minneapolis Sound came to be from Minneapolis. So all four of Prince's grandparents were from Louisiana, and they're all from that northwestern corner of the state. I've actually started trying to do some genealogy to go beyond his grandparents and, trying to identify even to the point of where his ancestors may have been enslaved people. And I'm still sort of working on that because obviously it's a lot harder when you're, looking at those histories. But by the turn of the 20th century, his four grandparents were living here. This was a time in the South characterized by Jim Crow law, rise of the KKK, following emancipation. There were a lot of other societal factors that were created to oppress African Americans living in the South. And so it was during this time that Congress also passed a law prohibiting immigration from certain countries. So what that meant was a lot of the industrialized manufacturing plants in the North needed laborers. So people from the South, African Americans from the South, thought, I could leave the oppression down here, go to the North for a better life with my family. So this is a period of time that's referred to as the Great Migration. So there's two waves, kind of broken up by World War II a bit. So 1910 to 1940 is that first wave. And then we've got 1940 to 1970. And the dots here are just simply representing, people who were in the South and then sort of moving up to the North. So you can see a lot of people went up to those industrialized, Rust Belt regions and such. Unfortunately, what a lot of African Americans found when they migrated up to the North was a different type of segregation and oppression. One of those tools that is also something that's very much part of the story of the city of Minneapolis is the use of housing covenants. So here's an example of a housing covenant. So I'm going to just take a moment to read this. The said property shall not be occupied by any person except a white Caucasian race, but person of other races may occupy the premises if they are employed. And then it just rambles into, no junk or ash and all that. What we see is as African Americans are moving up, you can see the correlation in the number of housing covenants that come in. This is actually the housing covenant on my house. So I have a house in Falcon Heights that this was on that property. I encourage all of you to take a chance to visit. The University of Minnesota has been involved in a program. It's called mappingprejudice.org. And you can go in and they have a timeline. So you can see as the number of African Americans moving up is increasing, so are the number of housing covenants. And you can see the impact that it has. So not only were people coming up facing limitations on where they could live, they were also facing limitations on where they could purchase property. So this is a map from 1930. So again, this is during that first wave of the Great Migration. And you can see the city of Minneapolis there with the river coming through it. I think it's got the interstates imposed on it too, so you can get those as a reference. So you can see green areas, no problem getting a loan. B, you're probably okay. C and D, forget it. You're not going to get a loan. So where do those areas correlate to? They correlate, the green and the blue are where there are housing covenants and where white people are living. And the yellow and the red are where African Americans are living. So this is also a map from 1930 showing where African Americans are residing in the city. And you see we develop several distinct neighborhoods. So we have the north side over there on the upper right, Seven Corners area, and then we have the south side. So again, this was limits where you could live, limits on the opportunity to purchase a home, which means passing on intergenerational wealth and establishing that American dream that many had. And some people might be like, well, yeah, but does that really affect things today? Unfortunately, it does. This is an older map, but it still shows the correlation of where African Americans live in Minneapolis, and even the effects that that has on the number of arrests for low-level crimes. So this pattern in Minneapolis is set up during the 20th century and really does come to shape a lot of aspects of our history and our culture. Going back to Prince, the subject of the night, it definitely influenced his family. So Prince talked, if you read a lot of stuff about Prince, he gave a lot of conflicting information about his parents. But he did start writing an autobiography right before his tragic death in 2016. And in it, he shared more stories about his parents too. And he did talk about the fact that his mom was the sort of fun, imaginative person that gave him his creative sense. And his father was, one with the music, and that they were very much the same. So we have some pictures here of his parents, but we'll see these. His dad, John Nelson, was actually born in Louisiana. We showed you where all the grandparents had come from. John was actually born there, and when he was a teenager, his family moved to Minneapolis. They went to the south side, right near where Bryan Junior High School was. They settled right in that area. And this is just an example of some of the primary research that I do to kind of build up this timeline. Like this is John Nelson's draft card from World War II. And we can see, he was working as at the hotel where he lived. He was married to a woman named Vivian. But so he was born in 1916. And then this is Prince's mom's family, the Shaw family. So we have Frank and Lucille, who are both born in Louisiana. And then up top there we see Lucille with their twin girls. The twin girls were born in November, and Edna Mae and Maddie Della. Maddie is Prince's mother. They met at the Phyllis Wheatley House Community Center. It's unfortunately gone. It was destroyed when Interstate 94 was put in. But this was an important location to a lot of people moving up from the South. They would go to settlement houses to figure out, where is it okay for me to live? Where can I get a job? Where can I go to a doctor who will treat me? The settlement house really became a focal point, but they also had a lot of social gatherings. So there was always music, dances, and it was at the Phyllis Wheatley House that John, who was married at the time, and Maddie, who was 17 years his junior, met. So John got a divorce. This is the marriage license for Prince's parents. They went to Iowa to get married. I don't know if anyone knows this, but in Minnesota, you used to have to wait 6 months after a divorce before you could remarry, and they didn't want to wait 6 months, so they drove across the border to Iowa and got married. By this time, John is working as a machine operator, and he actually worked at the Honeywell plant for the rest of his career. He was a musician. He did have a jazz trio, but he also held a day job working as a machine operator at Honeywell. So 9 months and 7 days later, Prince Rogers Nelson was born. Now, Prince was born, this is Chicago Avenue between 24th and 25th. It's now Hope Academy, but at the time it was Mount Sinai Hospital. Mount Sinai Hospital was established because Jewish doctors could not get hired in Minneapolis at most hospitals. So they came together and created Mount Sinai, and they treated cared for African-American patients who couldn't go to a lot of other regular hospitals. So this is where, on the 7th day of June, which is coming up here, Prince came into the world. So we're going to talk just a little bit about Prince's childhood and some of the places that he lived. These are some of the early residences. Now, on that marriage license, John already had an apartment here where he was living at, now I'm gonna forget the address. This is on Fifth Avenue, right by where 35W is. So after they got married for a few months, the family lived together in that location. But soon after, John and Maddie bought a house on the north side. Maddie had grown up there on the north side. Most of her family was there. So they moved up to the north side, and they bought this house that unfortunately is demolished. It was pink, and Prince talks about it a lot in his autobiography, that his first memories of his mom winking and smiling at him and sharing secrets, and of his dad's fluid piano playing. And this is what sparked a lot of his interest in the arts. We also have just a great picture here of John holding Prince in his lap, and then some of Prince's cousins. Prince, like I said, they had family in the area. Some of you may have heard of Charles Chaz Smith. Prince and he were cousins. They would play together all the time, and they actually formed a band together and would play here at this house. It's up in, just very close to where Prince was living. But I mentioned the pink house where Prince lived for the first 6 years of his life. Just before his 7th birthday, his parents bought this house at 2620 8th Avenue North. Now, when I first started this journey of trying to find Prince places, we didn't know about this. A lot of people were pointing to another house as being Prince's childhood home. But when I looked at city directories and property deeds, those other places weren't. This is where the family moved when Prince was still 6 years old. We have a picture of it from the back in the day. His sister Tyka wrote a book and had a picture of what the house looked like. This is a picture sort of what it looks like today. It's kind of in bad shape, to be honest. It's very overgrown. But this is the childhood home where it all happened for Prince. Prince's dad would play the piano, go to work, come home from work, play the piano. Prince would just watch him. He never took lessons. He just observed his dad playing the piano. And when his dad would leave, he would start messing around with it. He was completely self-taught, says he didn't read music, played everything by ear. And this is where he mastered the piano. By the time he was age 8, he had it pretty much figured out. It's also where he started learning the art of writing songs and singing songs. He talks in his autobiography about getting on his bike, going to Dee Dee's record shop, buying whatever the latest hit was. It could be Aretha, it could be James Brown, whoever. He would take the record back home, go into his bedroom, play it on his record player, write out the lyrics, put them in front of him, and then he would learn the chords, and then he would learn the phrasing of how each person sang their song. And this is how he really started to understand the craft of songwriting. Now, this house is also a location of sorrow for Prince. His parents, soon after moving in here, got separated and got divorced. There is reference to some physical violence that did happen. He had a deep love and respect for both of his parents, but he just knew they were not good together, so he was relieved when his father moved out, even though he loved him a lot. Prince stayed here for a short time. His mother remarried soon after the divorce, and some books you read will say that the stepfather was abusive towards Prince. I've talked to several family members. I can't say what Prince experienced, none of us can, right? But of the family members I talked to, there was just tension. Prince was a teenager. He didn't like a new person coming in telling him how to mow the lawn or how to clean his room. And he just decided to move out and go live with his father. So he lives here between roughly ages 6 and 12. And then he moves into this period of time where he's moving around quite a bit. And honestly, this has actually been a source of some conflict on social media about the timeline that I've come to through my research. When I do historical research, I always try and find at least 2 pieces of primary sources to sort of verify what was happening when. It can be an oral interview, it can be a city directory, it can be property deeds, it can be newspaper articles. But the story of Prince in his 12 to age 16 years is that he was moving around a bit. He also wanted to go to school somewhere else, so he took advantage of relatives living in different parts of town. So what we have is him moving in with John at his dad at John's apartment on Glenwood Avenue. Then because he wanted to go to Bryan Junior High, he moved into his dad's sister's house, which was right around the corner. And we'll talk a little bit more about why he went there. His dad then buys this white and black house you see here in December of 1972, when Prince was 14 and a half years old. Now, some people have said that that is the childhood home, but it couldn't be because John did not purchase it until Prince was 14 and a half. So from what I can tell, this is where Prince lived for a few years when he was 14, 15, and then he and his dad had a falling out. Apparently, Prince wasn't minding his dad's rules about having young ladies over, and it led to a fight, and so Prince moved out. He ended up going back to his Aunt Olivia's house for a very short period of time. After that, though, he returned back to the north side for about a year and a half, and moved in with his best friend, Andre Simone. Some of you may know that name. Andre played with Prince in his early bands, and the darker brick house is Andre's house. And again, some people have said, no, Prince lived there since he was 13, so your timeline can't be right. To me, the length of time isn't quite as important as what Prince found there. And what he found there was a lot of love and stability from Andre's mother, Bernadette Anderson. Bernadette was recently honored. The street, Russell Avenue, was renamed in her honor because she was such a pillar of the North Side community, giving back, supporting people. And for Prince and her children, she was like, pursue your music dreams, just make sure you get your schoolwork done. So that really is the importance of this location in Prince's story. So we're going to just talk a little bit about some of the social institutions and how that shaped Prince's life. Here we see Prince's mother, Maddie, with her aunt, Mary, and this was the Seventh-day Adventist church up on Glenwood Avenue that Prince attended. Now, apparently, Aunt Mary would make him and his cousin Charles Smith go to church, and it was long, but when they were done, she would take them to go see wrestling matches. So they were willing to put up with going to the church and all that. But Prince once said in an interview that the most he got out of church was the music, the choir. So, that is, this is probably the location where a lot of that influence, he experienced. The school system in the Twin Cities is also a really interesting story when it comes to Prince. There's been some stuff talking about Prince having to be bussed around the city because of school desegregation efforts. However, the timeline of what was going on in Minneapolis and Prince's story don't quite line up for that. Here we see Prince in 5th grade at John Hay Elementary School. You can see him there, circle. He's kind of given his little side-eye thing that he later became so famous for. Prince attended John Hay, which was his neighborhood school. But in 1967, the city of Minneapolis was getting pressure to desegregate schools. They didn't really do much other than offer parents the chance to voluntarily bus their kids to another school. Prince's parents took advantage of this for him and his sister Taika, bused them over to Kenwood Elementary. It wasn't a good experience for either child. They were bullied, they were harassed, and as soon as they could, they transferred back to John Hay. Now again, this wasn't an official school desegregation effort. It was more like, hey parents, we'll just, bus your kid for free if you want. Once he was finished at John Hay, which is demolished, it's no longer there, he transferred over to Lincoln Junior High School for 1 year. By the next year, he was going to Bryant, but that was 1970. School desegregation efforts hadn't started here in the Twin Cities at that time. It would be 2 more years and a court order before the city of Minneapolis actually started desegregation efforts. So why was Prince at Lincoln, his neighborhood school on the north side, for 1 year, and then transferred down to Bryant the next? Well, in his book, he talks about the north side having too much testosterone for him. There were too many fights, too many unwanted pregnancies, and Bryant had 2 things he was really into: music and basketball. Not that Lincoln didn't have basketball, but the Bryant team was just a little bit more exciting. So here we see a picture of Prince. I believe that is his 8th grade picture, 7th grade. We also see a picture of him on the basketball team down in the bottom with the number 3. Prince was a really good basketball player, and yes, he was very diminutive. He was 5'2", but apparently he was quite agile and able to, to hold his own on the court. As he got older, though, music became more of an interest to him, and he did sort of step away from the basketball court. We also, Central Junior High School is where he graduated from. Both Bryant and Central had very strong music programs. Bryant had classes on the business of music and music theory taught by Jimmy Hamilton. That drew Prince there, so again, he chose to go to the school. He was not forced to go there, through the desegregation efforts. But he did attend Central Junior High and graduated from there in 1976. And we're actually going to ask one of our audience members who apparently went to Central with Prince. She said she had an anecdote she wanted to share. So I'm going to just turn it over to her for a brief minute.
Hi, I'm Julie Miller. I was Julie Martin back those days, and I think that Bryant page, I'm up further on the page
Oh,
on that. I was taking notes because I learned a few things. This was interesting. So musically, yes, I remember him at Bryant and Central. Just fairly recently, I found my Bryant yearbook and couldn't find it to come here. I wish I could. But and talking about music, Mrs. Speed, who was the choir director at Central, came to Bryant, and she got a number of us to join the musical for Oliver. And I looked, and lo and behold, Prince, I think, played the drums for that, and that would have been in 8th grade. So that was kind of interesting. And I didn't know about that person that you just, Hamilton learning music theory. I wish I had. And so that goes into this next thing. So in high school, at Central, we had a fabulous choir. Oh my gosh, we went all over. Mrs. Speed was just fabulous, and it was wonderful. And I was in that choir. I was in a church choir and singing group, and I had a good friend who we sang together, and we wanted to sing a duet because there were lots of opportunities in our choir to do so. And so we, okay, let's ask Mrs. Speed, and we knew we'd have to rehearse over lunch. And we said, Mrs. Speed, we'd like to work on a duet. And she said, oh, okay. And then in the meantime, again, going to music theory. I didn't know that they taught it at Bryant. That would have been wonderful. As a choir, we were saying, Mrs. Speed, we need to learn music theory. We really need to learn. And she would smile. She said, yes, I'll try. So my girlfriend and I went to Mrs. Speed and we said, we'd like to work on a duet. And she said, you know what, the only time to work on it is during lunch hour, and I can't because I'm giving Prince music theory lessons. And we looked at her, we said, why? He's not in choir, he's not in band, why Prince? And she just looked at us and smiled. It took us a few years to figure out why. But otherwise, he was that quiet person that you mentioned, in Bryant and Central, I just knew him as like Mutt and Jeff. He was Mutt, and his cousin Dwayne Nelson was his.
that's actually Dwayne in number 21.
Oh yeah. So they were inseparable always. And to think about Dwayne, to think about Prince playing basketball, like, oh, okay, whatever. Anyway, but they were inseparable, and they were and he was very quiet. And why did I even know who he was? He had an unusual name. I don't know.
Yeah, awesome. You can hand that back to Johnny. I'll just mention about Dwayne. Prince sang about him. My brother, tall and athletic, I can't remember the exact words. They were actually believed to be half brothers because John's first wife, Vivian, had Dwayne after they got divorced, and John said, okay, I'm his father, but when they were settling the heirs for the Prince's estate, they did the DNA test, and they were not related. So they grew up thinking that they were brothers, and they actually both passed and, sort of didn't know that aspect of it. Here is a newspaper article that ran about Prince while he was in Central, and I know you can't read all of this, but he was asked in that second paragraph that he thought it unfortunate that he was born in Minneapolis. Why? Because he thought that if he was one of the coasts, he would have been discovered already. He would have had the recording contract, but because he's here in Minnesota where there's just no infrastructure for the music industry. So this is one of those cases where he's kind of poo-pooing his hometown, but, that's okay. Outside of the schools, the way was also critical it's really the crucible probably of the Minneapolis Sound. So what was the way? In the summers of 1966 and 1967, there was civil unrest on the north side of Minneapolis. Many African American communities around the nation were frustrated by the lack of economic growth that they saw others experiencing but weren't happening to them, their families, their neighborhoods. So there were protests across many cities at that time. In the North Side, the troops, the National Guard troops were called out, and there was, lots of police action, and the North Side was shut down. There was really no systemic change that came after that event, except for the fact that there was a community center that was created for kids on the North Side, and it was called The Way. So similar to the settlement houses that we talked about earlier, The Way would have, opportunities for jobs and internships and all that, but they also had a house band, and they had instruments. So kids like Prince, Morris Day, Andre Simone could go here and hang out, and the house band was called The Family, and Sonny Thompson, who Prince later included in one of his bands, was sort of the leader of it. And if you haven't been to Bunkers, go see Dr. Mambo's Combo. They play every Sunday night. Sometimes Sonny's there, sometimes he's not, but when you catch Sonny play, he is the most incredible musician. Like, even Prince would say, I can't hold a candle to Sonny. He is just a truly remarkable musician. And that was a key, crucial part in Prince becoming Prince. Again, he didn't just come out of nowhere. He was in this city with these opportunities to really learn his craft. Unfortunately, The Way was demolished, and the 4th Police Precinct was put on the exact location, which was, very alarming to many people in the North Side community. What had been a place of gathering and support was now a site of, a different aspect. So let's move quickly into as Prince becomes a musician. So, he said in that article I showed you when he was a senior that he had started a band a few years earlier. The band's name, and that was just the union newsletter showing the music union, showing that in 1976, Prince, Andre Anderson, who's Andre Simone, Morris Day, and William Doherty were all official union musicians. So Prince had sort of different people involved in his bands over time. We have a few pictures here. His cousin Charles and he did play together in a band for a while, but then Charles got kicked out and was replaced by Morris Day. We see the band Grand Central in the center. Prince is the second from the left, and then Morris Day is 2 more in. And that's kind of hard to see, but they're playing at a fashion show. They're in the background. So Grand Central had a lot of people for a while, but after time, it just kind of honed down to Andre Simone, Prince, and Morris Day on the drums. They would play school dances. They would play fashion shows. They would play the state fair. They would go all around the cities to play. But they often participated in what was called the Battle of the Bands. So Grand Central would often compete against a band called Mind and Matter. And this house at 1514 Oliver Avenue North is where Mind and Matter recorded, in the basement. And here we see a picture of Mind and Matter. Does anyone know who's on the keytar there with the big smile? Jimmy Jam. So that's James, Jimmy Jam, Harris III, thank you. And his father, Cornbread Harris, is a local legend and part of that sort of shaping of the Minneapolis Sound. So it would be Grand Central, Mind and Matter, and Flight Time. Anyone know who's on the bass? Terry Lewis, exactly. So Terry Lewis, Cynthia Johnson, if you've heard the song Funky Town, the voice, the female voice, that's Cynthia. And Sue Ann Carwell, who's just amazing musician. If you get a chance to see her, highly do. But these bands would all get together and compete, and it was all about who could write more songs, who could perform, the best cover of a Zeppelin hit or whatever. And it's during this time, as they're playing for these different groups, they have to learn a lot of different musical styles. Predominantly White City, you're going to play a school dance. They're going to want to hear Santana, Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones. So we get this incorporation of rock music into the funk and soul, and that is part of this sort of crucible of the Minneapolis Sound. And it's also at this time that Prince starts recording as a session musician. The first place that he recorded was Cookhouse Studios. This is on Nicollet Avenue. You probably have driven past it a million times. So much music history in this one location. It could be a whole talk in and of itself. But it was recording here with the band 94 East. Pepe Willie invited Prince to be a session musician. Now, Pepe died yesterday, and Pepe was an amazing human being. I had the chance to talk to him many times, and he really took Prince under his wing and taught him how to craft a song for radio play. He was his manager for a while. He just did everything he could to really help promote Prince, and he had his own band, 94 East. If you've never listened to them, go home and try and listen to it on, Apple Music or whatever. Again, an early pillar of the founding of the Minneapolis Sound, and yeah, he'll be dearly missed. He also wrote a book if you want information on that. So Prince is 16 at Cookhouse Studio, goes in, lays down these great tracks. It was also at this time that Prince and Andre and Morris went to record at Moon Sound Studio. Chris Moon is in the corner there. Now, he would make recording affordable to, you didn't have to pay hundreds of dollars. You could go in and record some demos for maybe, $40, which was much more attainable. One day, the three of them were recording. Morris and Andre decide to walk across the street to the Baskin-Robbins to get some ice cream. Prince stays behind, and he starts playing the drums, playing the piano, playing the guitar, playing all the instruments, and Chris Moon is watching. Chris Moon wasn't a musician himself. He wanted to be a songwriter, and so he was looking for someone to record his music. So he thought, if I just work with this one kid, I don't have to worry about the drummer showing up drunk or the guitar player not coming in. I can just teach this one kid how to do it all. So they struck up a deal. Every day after school, Prince would come over. Moon will have left the lyrics, and Prince would start recording. So this is an incredibly important site, too, because this is where Prince starts to learn how to do and control all the recordings. This is what he does as a successful musician. He writes, composes, performs, engineers, produces all of his music. So without this time here, he would not have been able to do that. We are running short on time. I might have to skip a few sites. So it's also at this time that Prince moves out of Andre Simone's house and he gets his first apartment. Now you're wondering, why is there a picture of a car here? This is how I found where the apartment building was his car title. So he, after getting a little ahead of the story, after he gets his recording contract deal, he goes out and he buys a car. It's a 77 Datsun. Yes, I've been online to see if that VIN number still exists and if I could purchase Prince's first car. I haven't found it yet. But so this is where Prince moves in the Uptown neighborhood. And it's during this time that he is working at Sound 80 Studio. Now, Chris Moon had introduced Prince to a man named Owen Husney, and Owen recognized Prince talent. So did Chris Moon, so did everybody, including your choir teacher. Owen Husney got Prince time at Sound 80 Recording Studio. Sound 80 is the premier recording studio in the Twin Cities in the 70s. It's state-of-the-art. Bob Dylan fixed his masterpiece, Blood on the Tracks, here. Funky Town was recorded here. Cat Stevens recorded here. They do tours there if you want to get in and learn the history of this building. But this was the place where Prince needed to be they had all the latest equipment. This is where Prince got hip to polymogs and synthesizers and drum machines. So again, very critical in his development. Here we see some pictures of him working in Sound 80. So while at Sound 80, Prince records his demo tapes. Owen takes him to Los Angeles, and they get into a bidding war between all the major recording contracts. But Prince, on June 19, 1977, lands a 3-record, multi-million-dollar recording contract with Warner Brothers. He says he was 17, he was 19. Prince always shaved 2 years off his age, just kind of make him seem like a little bit more of a, like a Stevie Wonder type. But here we see a picture of him getting his recording contract. Now, I am sorry to say I was not able to find any Prince-associated property with Linden Hills. Like, I'm sure he was here. I know he walked around the lakes and all that stuff, but we got close. After Prince moved out of that apartment, he did rent this house in Fulton. It has been completely gutted. In fact, the people who did the remodeling was like, you can have Prince's bathtub, because they gutted it and were like selling everything out of the house. So it's been completely redone, but he makes this move to, this nicer, more affluent area soon after getting his recording contract. Now it's also, Prince releases his first album, For You, in 1978. And this is the first time we see those words: produced, performed, composed, arranged, engineered, everything by Prince. It does well in the R&B markets, but doesn't have the crossover hits that he's really hoping for. Now, the problem with being a one-man band in the recording studio is when you have to go on tour, you have to have a band. You can't do it all while you're standing up there on stage. Warner Brothers really pushed him to have LA session musicians tour with him, and Prince said, absolutely not. I'm going back to Minneapolis, and I'm going to get musicians who know the sound that I'm trying to create. So he comes back, he gets Andre Simone, Bobby Rifkin, Bobby Z, and others to perform live with him. So we have a picture of him performing at the Capri Theater in January of 1979. Now, this is also interesting because Prince wanted to come back. He wanted to go to his North Side neighborhood, and this theater was struggling financially. So he made it a charitable event. All the proceeds went to the owner. Prince was known later in life for his philanthropic endeavors. It starts from day one with Prince. Now, they got on stage. Warner Brothers executives came in. They didn't do well. They didn't have it all together yet. So they were told, you can't tour yet. And that kind of bummed Prince out. But it was all fine because soon enough, he figured out the live performance thing. So soon after that, Prince continued his westward journey. Right? We've got him coming over here to the Fulton neighborhood. But then shortly after his second album, he moves out to the city of Orono on the shores of Lake Minnetonka, which of course Prince makes famous in the movie Purple Rain about purifying yourself in the waters of Lake Minnetonka. I couldn't figure out where this house was, but somebody found a letter addressed to Prince at that time, and I went to the city and I was able to track down there was some issue with the sanitary sewer there, and you can see Prince Nelson, the renter. So this was sort of that other piece of evidence of Prince living here. Now, what happens when Prince gets here is, remember, he had a 3-record contract. For You, he spent so much time trying to make it perfect. Every sound, every element, every note. He blew most of his budget on that. His second album, Prince, he did better on. But now he had to deliver a third album, and he was out of time and money. So he kind of isolates himself at this house, and he picks up a ratty old guitar that he has. Typically, he performs music on, or composes on the piano, but he went with guitar here, and he created what Rolling Stone called the greatest 180 in rock music history. Before, his first 2 albums were kind of sweet and coy and flirty, but with his album Dirty Mind, he really crossed over into a much more aggressive sound, much more explicit lyrics, and commercially it didn't necessarily do all that well, but critically it was a great success. And it was, Prince was saying that he wasn't being deliberately provocative, he was being deliberately himself. But that was a fun place to kind of find. Over time, Prince moves into properties that he owns. This is the first house that he purchases. It's demolished, it's gone. But the important thing in all these places where Prince was living is they all had a recording studio in them. Prince was known for marathon recording sessions. 36 hours was not uncommon, just record, play, perform. So he had to have the equipment in his house too. Sorry, I'm just skipping ahead because we are running out of time. This was another house that he purchased after the Purple House. And once again, he had it demolished. It's interesting, the Purple House was demolished. His father passed away there. Maybe there was some painful memories. Again, I don't know. I don't want to speak for Prince. This house he had demolished following his second divorce. I'm not sure what the reasons were, but these are both important recording locations where so many songs were laid down and now they're gone. And I did mention early on Paisley Park. Paisley Park was built as an artist's compound, but towards the end of his life, he did reside here. And sadly, this is the location where he passed away from an accidental fentanyl overdose in April of 2016. So I'm going to actually skip ahead here and just bring this to conclusion by saying, I think Ruth mentioned that part of what I'm trying to do here is to make sure that the places that made Prince are around in the future. I think and hope Paisley Park will be here for a long time. And it's an incredibly important location in Prince's life story. Kid from the North Side who made it to an international superstar and had that, amazing compound built. But the places that made Prince and connects him to the city of Minneapolis and the development of that Minneapolis Sound, I think are equally as important and worthy of being preserved. So the childhood home has been recognized as historically significant for the National Register of Historic Places, which is hard to do. Childhood homes are kind of tricky because Prince wasn't Prince at this time. But the argument I made was that but for the time and effort and work that he put in here honing his craft, he couldn't have been Prince without that time. And so it was great that that was historic. And Sound 80 is also officially on the National Register of Historic Places, not only for the association with Prince, but also for the other artists who perform there. The sad thing is, as I've done this research, well over 60, maybe even up to 70% of the places associated with Prince are already gone or have been changed so much that they don't really have integrity. And so, we are at the start of a burgeoning international tourist attraction. The way people go to Memphis to learn about Elvis, people come here to learn about Prince. But are we going to have the places preserved for future generations to really understand and know that story? So as I wrap up, I do want to say that next Monday, so in a week, for Preserve Minneapolis, I am doing a walking tour of the North Side sites that you saw tonight. So if anyone wants to get out and see some of these places, go to the Preserve Minneapolis website. But I also put on your chairs a card. My business partner, Sarah, came all the way over from London, and she and I decided after hearing so many people wanting to learn about Prince and his connection to Minneapolis, but she's not always available. I have a day job. We can't always lead tours. What we thought we would do is create, and what we did do, we have an app. So you can download the app to your phone and then go to purchase the various tours we offer. We have a downtown Minneapolis one that talks about the folk, punk, and funk scenes, so more than just Prince. We have the full Prince tour, which is over 50 stops. We have the Minneapolis Sound tour, so it talks about the other artists associated with it. And the beauty of these tours is it's more content than I can obviously share in an hour. You can also do it at your own pace. You can be like I'm going to be out in the suburbs. I'm going to go check out those 3 stops now. Next time you're in the north side, you can see those. You don't have to do it all in one day. And we're hoping that that really gives an opportunity for people to continue to learn more about the importance of music to this city. And with that, I thank you all for a very funky time.
Thank you. That was outstanding. We do have time for some questions. If you have questions, I'll bring the mic over to you.
Didn't he own a bar downtown for a while?
He did own a. He
What was
did.
the
It was
name of
called
it?
Glam Slam, and I'm sorry, in my rush to kind of stay on track, Glam Slam. He opened in '88, and he had a song of the same name. Yep, and you can see sort of the love symbol that was out there. He also opened one in Japan and Florida, a couple other places. It didn't last for very long. It was probably around for about 5 years. He also had a store in Uptown, right across from Calhoun Square. I don't know what we call it now. It's now like a smoke shop, and it's on the tour. You know, he had this new power generation store, so you could go in and buy latest clothing and music. And he had a similar store in London in the Camden neighborhood.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Fine, and my connection to Prince is that I worked for Owen Husney.
You did?
Yes, I did. In the mid-'70s.
Oh my gosh.
Owen Husney owned an advertising agency called the Ad Company at the Loring Park building. I was a media buyer for him. And Prince, I believe it was, he was either a junior in high school, and he used to just come and hang out in the lobby waiting for Owen to talk music with him because every afternoon. I didn't appreciate Prince at the time, I'm sorry to say. He was
That's okay.
sort of a skinny guy with a lot of hair, and I wish I would have made friends with him, but I was busy in my own right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the story is we had a receptionist at the Ad Company, and I think he had a crush on her, and evidently wrote some lyrics about her.
Oh.
And she was she was interviewed after he passed away, and she said she didn't have the lyrics anymore, but she'd wondered if they were still in the vault.
The vault, yes. Paisley Park has, well, they've actually moved it now to a secure place in California, but Prince kept what was called the vault. Prince had lots of ideas, and he had to exercise them, and he would record them, and then he may put them on an album, or he may just file them away in the vault, maybe dust it off in 10 years, maybe never touch it again. So, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing.
This weekend, this Saturday, there's going to be something taking place in downtown Minneapolis related to Prince. I forget what it's called right now. Oh, but it's happening around First Avenue.
Yeah, it's a block party right at First Avenue. So this weekend I see we have one person here wearing a Celebration t-shirt. So every year there is a gathering of the Prince Purple family to be at Paisley Park, be in Minneapolis, listen to concerts, see film footage, be together. And part of what's happening Saturday, yes. And it's open to all, so anyone can show up. You don't have to have a ticket for Celebration. And it'll just be music and dancing in the streets of Minneapolis, which I think Prince would be very happy about.
What time is that?
It starts at 5, and I think it goes to 1.
In front of First Ave?
Right in front of First Ave, and you know where the big mural is? It's like that block there. Yep.
Hi, I'm Judy. I just wanted to have the symbol explained. Was he known as Cymbalina for a while?
I'm sorry.
Symbol. What was the meaning of his symbol?
The symbol? Okay, so the symbol was something that I think he was looking for a way to sort of represent, he often spoke of like his sort of dual personality in some way. He was a Gemini, and he had a lot of masculine and feminine concepts is kind of the way he explained it. So he started playing around with the idea of a symbol. He called it the love symbol. And it went through various iterations throughout time. I have a tattoo of one of the earlier ones, which was kind of around the Purple Rain era, much more sort of straight, but it incorporates the male and the female love symbol. And it was just part of his iconography. Now, over time, he evolved, and it became a little bit more curly Q on one side, so it actually has a backwards 7 on it, and it's a little more circular. Anyway, Prince, in 1993, he released an album that had what was called the love symbol on it. Ironically, the album has a song called My Name is Prince, but it's at that same time that Prince says that his name is the love symbol. It's unpronounceable. He got a lot of flack for it at the time. What it was really about was his conflict with Warner Brothers and the owning of what he created. He was taking a stand against companies owning the creative material of the artist. And so he was trying to make a point, Warner Brothers doesn't have a contract with me, they have a contract with Prince. And it became sort of a legal battle for a while for him to get back the rights to his masters. We've been hearing about that right now with Taylor Swift. Very much, and Prince is really one of the first artists. I'm sure there are other artists before them, but he was one of the most outspoken and really made this public statement about how artists should be able to maintain their masters. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was really interesting. I didn't know most of this. I'm curious if you came to this first as a historian or as a lover of Prince's music.
So that's a great question. I loved Prince since I first saw him. I grew up in Bismarck, North Dakota, where I like to say we had both kinds of music, country and Western. So when MTV came on, I was kind of blown away. And then when there was a lot of artists I fell in love with because of MTV, but Prince was especially memorable to me, and I just fell in love with him. So again, when he passed, and it was so sudden and so shocking, and I'm not an artist, I'm not a singer, I'm like, what can I do to honor his legacy? And so part of it was using that historian preservationist brain. What can I do to sort of correct the chronology of his journey from the north side to Paisley Park? So they just beautifully came together in a way I could never have imagined. Yeah.
I forgot one little tidbit. So as a senior in high school, our principal said that she was going to have a concert for Prince. And, we never had, in high school, we didn't have assemblies, we didn't do that. But she was going to have a concert and she said, y'all won't be able to afford his concerts.
Oh, my.
Which was really true. And I thought, we grew up with classical music, and that was the only thing allowed in our house. So I thought, okay, I rolled my eyes and brought my homework along. But I was there, front row, and I'm sad to say I don't remember what he played because he could have done any of the instruments.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but that was neat of our choir director, our principal, they recognized what was going on, and she gave us the opportunity to, I've been to a Prince concert.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool.
That's incredible. I would like to talk to you a little bit more about the specifics of that. Oh, you got it? Okay.
Could you speak to how Prince was purchasing some of those properties himself? I think there's the house that was used in the filming of Purple Rain on Snelling Avenue in Longfellow.
So Prince's premiere film debut was Purple Rain. It was filmed in the Twin Cities in 1983 and released in 84. In it, he plays character the kid. A lot of people say it's semi-autobiographical. It's really not. There are some things. His parents, there was some violence between them. Prince is from Minneapolis, but it's really not Prince's story. But the character that he plays, the kid, the exterior shots for that home was here at 3520 Snelling Avenue. You can go over and see it, but yes, you're right. The year before Prince passed away, he purchased this house. Prince had been talking about turning Paisley Park into a museum and had actually started, opening it up in that capacity. So was he thinking about what to do with this? I actually talked to his sister, who now also unfortunately has passed. But I talked to his sister, and she was talking about moving this house and that white and black house where Prince lived as a teenager out to Paisley Park. I've kind of gently suggested that maybe instead of moving the houses there, they can send people to those places to really see that connection to Minneapolis. They never moved it, but they have refurbished it, and it's now an Airbnb experience. So you can stay in the kids' basement bedroom, and it looks just like it does in the movie. Even though those shots were filmed in a different location, it's still a really cool idea. He was also, he kept ownership of that white and black house that he lived in briefly as a teenager. That still is part of the estate. But like the yellow house, the childhood home, that is not part of the estate. I'm also wanting to buy that house. Yeah.
I was wondering, has the estate been settled?
Has the estate been settled? That is a really good question. And I have tried for the most part to stay away from that side of it and try and focus more on, the history and the places associated with Prince. I think it's somewhat settled, but I think there are still disputes between some of the members of the estate still. It's really complicated. Yeah, and it's also notable, I guess, that Prince fought so hard to get his masters, and then he didn't leave a will. And so now there's so much uncertainty about ownership and all that. It's unfortunate.
You talked about the Capri Theater. Have you been there of late since the renovation? And
yes.
It is an absolutely beautiful theater. If you haven't had a chance to go, please do. They have a wide variety of things happening. First Thursdays through the Minneapolis Film Society. There are incredible films. There are concerts. It's a really, really vibrant place. On the north side, the renovation was fantastic. I was a tour guide during the grand opening of the Capri, and it's a wonderful place that needs all of our support.
Yes, I second that. I love it from a historic preservation standpoint because they kept the theater where Prince and others performed, so it's intact. The building has been expanded and it's much more functional now. So it's a really great integration of preserving while modernizing, and yeah.
The stage is exactly the way it was when Prince performed.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful place to see music and film and support an incredible theater that
they need
does
support.
So much.
Yeah.
Well, if that's it, Kristen, you did a fabulous job. Thank you.